They told me revenge would make me feel empty, that it would hollow me out until I recognized nothing of myself. They were wrong. He had been easy to love. He had been easy to trust. He had been a house full of small comforts. The way he warmed his hands over his coffee mug before passing it to me, the way his laugh filled the doorway when I walked in, the way he whispered my name when he thought I was asleep. I collected those small things the same way other people collected stamps. I framed them into a life I thought was mine. Then I found the receipt. It was tucked between the pages of a book I had left on the kitchen table. I remember the paper more than the moment. Thick, glossy, the kind restaurants print when they want the bill to look important. It had his name on it, our city, a date. The total was more than that night's dinner should have been. The pen strokes were hurried, like someone trying not to be noticed. And beneath the itemized charges, in blunt, small letters, room 407. Everything rearranged itself after that piece of paper. The world took on a crisp, surgical etch. My memory rewound, and little things blipped into relevance. The fragrance on his collar that wasn't mine, the extra text message he always left unanswered until morning, the way his excuses had a way of wearing down into silence. I watched my life the way you watch a slow spill, calm at first, until the stains become obvious. I did not confront him. There are different kinds of confrontation. There is the messy kind, the shout and slam doors kind, and there is the kind that arrives like winter and never leaves. I chose the latter. Confrontation, I decided, would be a ledger. I would balance his accounts. He thought his life was a series he controlled. Meetings, emails, weekend golf, the occasional anniversary where he remembered just enough. He thought I was a constant, a base he could come back to when the rest of the world tired him. He calculated without fearing balance. That miscalculation would be his undoing. You learn to be methodical when the stakes are your dignity. I cataloged everything, dates, times, patterns. I learned his calendar better than he did. I learned the names of the places he visited and the way his schedule shifted when he lied. He had been sloppy because he had learned to believe in his own charm. Sloppiness is a bridge. You walk 1,000 small steps across it, then you trip on the 1,001st. The first part of my plan was boring, administrative, dry as paper. I requested a copy of our shared accounts, an itemized statement of purchases. I read terms of service and privacy policies until legal words loosened their hold of me. I opened a tiny sliver of surprise. Joint accounts were not as joint as his ego believed. There were business accounts, invoicing services with automatic transfers disguised as consulting fees, invoices to clients that matched dates he said he was at the office. He had turned our life into a ledger that justified his side of the story. After the receipts, I moved to the workspace. He bragged about his project all the time, how it would change things at the firm, how they would see him differently. Pride is the exact friction that makes a person confident in public and careless in private. I did something small but important. I asked his coworkers about him in the way you ask about weather, casual, light, not giving away that I was paying attention. People like to talk. They will do so when you offer a smile and a burnt coffee anecdote. I listened. I gathered names, assistants, junior project managers, the woman who handled client dinners, the IT guy who fixed the server at 3 in the morning. I kept a list in my phone that looked, to any careless eye, like grocery items. The second, more scientific part of my strategy involved his digital life. He had always been sloppy online, the kind of man who thought a private message stayed private. He used his company email for everything, banking alerts, lunch orders, even the flirtation messages he convinced himself were harmless. He was the sort of person who didn't update passwords because the inconvenience offended him. I watched, I waited, I tested. I found a way in through a trivial oversight, an old registration his vanity site required with an email he'd abandoned. He used the same answers for favorite pet's name or first school as passwords across his accounts. People who cheat rarely guard the puzzle pieces that matter. They hide the big secrets behind the small ones that never seem valuable. I used those small things like keys. What I took from him was not dramatic theft. It was a proofreading of his life. I pulled invoices, payment confirmations, and a rash of messages that were good enough to be ruinous. I did not redistribute them. Not immediately. I collected them like a surgeon gathers tools before an operation. People think revenge needs fire and flourish. They do not realize that terror is quieter, an entropy that slowly rewrites a person's genome of self-regard. My plan required patience. Every long game requires patience. When I was ready, I began to rearrange his public timeline. He had built a reputation at work, reliable, ambitious, the kind of man companies point to when they want a case study about integrity. It is much easier to topple someone who preens like a statue than someone who already crouches in the dark. To change his world, I needed public evidence. I sent an innocuous email to the firm's compliance department, an anonymous tip that there might be irregularities in vendor billing. The email was a seed. It was drafted with the boredom of a bureaucrat so that the firm would not suspect theatrics. I knew compliance offices responded to patterns more than to passion. My submission was procedural, concise, citing dates, referencing contracts with no inflammatory adjectives. It was as unreadable as a corporate memo. It smelled of teeth and policy. That made it credible. The investigation began slowly, the way a watch begins to tick after being set, method by method, unnoticed until the sound is everywhere. Papers were requested. Access logs were checked. HR spoke to him in the kind of hallways that echo. He grew defensive. He replied to emails under pressure with clipped sentences, and then with too long replies that contradicted themselves. He tried to act surprised. Surprise does not cover all the bases when you are being audited. When the company called him into a meeting, he wore his best face. That face was where he kept everything: confidence, denial, blame. The meeting was supposed to be a technicality. You cannot feel humiliation through a screen, but you can feel it in the way someone's shoulders narrow. He came home that night looking like a man who had misplaced a key and couldn't find his hands. I watched all of it and kept walking. The economy of silence had become my currency. I worked. I moved money. I checked the stock of the firm he was building his freelance invoices through. I quietly advised a client of mine who coincidentally needed a consultant with his set of skills. The client asked for a recommendation. I recommended her. She loved my work. The firm rose a different way. People ask if revenge is satisfying in the moment. It is briefly, like a bright but shallow cut. But then there is a deeper thread: what follows the act. You either step into new soil or continue to till a field where nothing grows. I stepped into new soil. He was not stupid. Not at first. He was only unobservant. When the company escalated the audit, he panicked in the ineffable way men do when their identities wobble. He made mistakes. He called his lovers by wrong names on blithe voice notes. He forgot to clear browser histories. He accused colleagues of betrayal in emails he sent at 3 a.m. Each error was a chisel to a statue. The second phase was to remove his comforts. Not violently, not in an obvious way, small, precise amputations. I had access to his life in ways that looked accidental. I rerouted an automatic payment he had set up for a landlord. It failed the rent notice once, then twice. He thought it a bank error. When the landlord called, he answered with the same smooth voice that used to lull me, except he sounded tired. Nights in hotels crept in. Late-night excuses became his bedrock. He ran out of familiar spaces that once felt safe. I altered his social calendar in ways he could not blame. I booked a dinner at a new restaurant for his anniversary with the woman he had been seeing, an appointment that would, for his ego, become a screen of normalcy. I then called the restaurant and asked them to check their records for the night. The host remembered being kept waiting by a man wearing the same coat he always loved to show off. The restaurant kept a copy of the card used. My hand in the machine of things was always gentle and bureaucratic. Records do not lie, people do. There is an art to watchful cruelty. You do not burn a person's house down, you rearrange the furniture so that they always feel off balance. He woke up to messages from his real clients asking for receipts and explanations. He grew isolated as colleagues who had admired him began to avoid the sting of association. Reputation is social capital. I banked on interest rates. One night, he called in a panic. His voice trembled in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with embarrassment. He told me there were emails he did not send and receipts he could not explain. He asked for help in the way cornered men do,